Question 1. From the perspective of ESL execution, Mr. Harrison notices that a airlock takes unusually long to execute due to repeat SQL statements inside a loop. Which approach should he take to optimize performance? A. Use dynamic SQL inside the loop. B. Replace the loop with a bulk collect and for all statement. C. Split the block into multiple smaller anonymous blocks. D. Increase the server memory allocation. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Using bulk collect with for all significantly reduces context switching between SQL agents by fetching and processing multiple rows at once. Dynamic SQL inside loops adds overhead. Splitting blocks doesn't improve performance inherently, and increasing memory alone doesn't address repeated SQL execution. This approach adheres to ESQL best practices, emphasizing efficient DML and minimizing repeated pass execution cycles. Optimizing loops with bulk operations is key principle for high-volume data manipulation. Question 2. Considering the evidence, Is Patel needs to define a package where certain utility procedures should remain private, but some functions must be accessible across sessions. How should she implement this? A. Declare all procedures and functions in the package body only. B. Place public procedures in the specification and private procedures in the body. C. Use standalone procedures for public access. D. Keep all subprograms in the package specification. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. In ESQL, package specifications declare public subprograms that can be accessed externally, while the body can include private procedures hidden from external calls. Declaring all subprograms only in the body makes none accessible outside the package. Standalone procedures are outside the package context, and placing all in the specification exposes everything. This structure ensures encapsulation, maintains mod design, and preserves package state, aligning with Oracle best practices for package design and information hiding. Question 3. Given the circumstances, ISTA is designing a trigger to automatically audit changes to an employee table whenever salary updates occur. Which trigger type should he use to capture both the old and new salary values? A. Before insert row level trigger. B. After update row level trigger. C. Before delete statement level trigger. D. After update statement level trigger. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. A row level after update trigger allows access to both old and new pseudo records for every affected row, which is essential to log changes like salary updates. Before insert triggers are for new row initialization. Delete triggers capture deletions rather than updates, and statement level triggers execute once per statement. Lacking row specific data, using an after update row level trigger aligns with audit compliance requirements, capturing precise transactional changes while maintaining the integrity of the auditing process. Question 4. In an effort to modularize code, Dr. Gonzalez wants to pass an array of employee IDs to a procedure for processing. What SQL collection type should he use for maximum flexibility? A. Vary with fixed size. B. Nested table. C. Associative array indexed by binary integer. D. Cursor for loop. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Associative arrays offer flexible, sparse indexing, allowing dynamic insertion and deletion, making them suitable for variable length datasets. Arrays have a fixed upper limit. Nested tables can be extended but require more complex handling for sparse elements. A cursor for loop is for fetching rows, not directly for collection passing. Associative arrays provide efficient in-memory storage and direct index, ideal for PSQL procedures needing fast, flexible manipulation of arbitrary employee IDs while avoiding unnecessary overhead. Question 5. The primary reason for isCohen's function failing is that it sometimes returns a null value when querying table. Which exception handling approach would best resolve this? A. Use when others than null. B. Implement no data found exception handler. C. Ignore exceptions and rely on default values. D. Convert the function to procedure. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Handling null returns properly ensures predictable behavior, while no data found captures queries returning no rows. Some functions may legitimately return null, requiring conditional logic or default values rather than an exception handler. using when others then null suppresses important errors and converting to a procedure changes semantics and loses return capability. Correct exception handling emphasizes predictable behavior, aligning with PL SQL guidelines, ensuring that null values are treated logically without masking other potential runtime issues. Question 6. Illustrated by recent performance testing, Kim notices that opening multiple explicit cursors in nested loops slows down processing. What is the most conceptually correct solution? A. Replace explicit cursors with implicit cursors inside the loops. B. Declare all cursors globally in the package. C. Use cursor for loops to simplify management and reduce boilerplate. D. Close cursors at the end of the program only. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. What cursor for loops simplify cursor handling and reduce boilerplate, leaving multiple cursors open throughout. A loop consumes resources. Explicit cursors should be closed as soon as they are no longer needed to free memory and avoid exceeding session cursor limits. Implicit cursors do not offer row-specific control, and global cursor declarations increase resource consumption unnecessarily. Proper management of life cycles is crucial for performance and resource optimization in SQL applications. Question 7. To determine whether a dynamic SQL statement executed successfully is new and decides to ESA, which aspect of dynamic SQL execution is essential in this context? A. Binding variables before execution. B. Declaring static cursors for all queries. C. Committing each DML automatically. D. Avoiding exceptions during execution. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Dynamic SQL allows runtime construction of queries, but transactional control is critical. Without committing DML, changes may not persist or may conflict with other transactions. Binding variables improves security and efficiency, but does not ensure transactional integrity. Static cursors cannot handle dynamic statements, and exceptions must be explicitly handled. Proper use of commits and save points ensures dynamic SQL changes are consistent, atomic, and aligned with Oracle best practices for transactional control in dynamic execution environments. Question 8. From multiple perspectives, Sharma wants to track the number of rows affected by a meta-operation within a procedure. What SQL construct should he rely on? A. SQL % count attribute. B. Cursor %found attribute. C. DBMS output line. D. Commit and rollback commands. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. SQL % count directly returns the number of rows affected by the most recent DML statement, making it precise for monitoring operations. Cursor %found only indicates if any rows exist, not that DBMS output merely outputs messages and doesn't track row counts, while commit and rollback manage transactions but provide no row-level feedback. Leveraging SQL % lines of PSQL best practices, allowing developers to validate operations, enforce business rules, and ensure accurate feedback for program logic and auditing purposes. Question 9. When faced with a scenario where a function and a procedure share the same name but different parameter types, Lopez wants both to coexist in a package. What concept allows this in ELSL? Function overloading. B. Package state. C. Anonymous block encapsulation. D. Cursor for loop iteration. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. SQL supports subprogram overloading, allowing multiple subprograms with the same name but different parameter signatures to coexist, enhancing modularity and reusability. Package state maintains persistent variable values. Anonymous blocks execute logic without being reusable, and cursor for loops manage row iteration. Overloading improves clarity, avoids naming conflicts, and enables polymorphic behavior, adhering to best practices for designing maintainable LSQL packages and subprograms, ensuring logical separation of functionality while leveraging consistent naming conventions. Question 10. While examining the code, Dr. Rivera notices that a record variable is being used to store values from multiple columns of a table row. SQL feature allows this. A. Percentro type attribute. B. Scalar variable. C. Array of single column. D. For all statement. Answer. Correct answer. D. Explanation. The Percentro type attribute defines a record variable that automatically inherits the structure of A table or cursor row allowing multiple columns to be stored efficiently. Scalar variables hold only single values. Varies store collections of single column values, and for all is used for but DML, not row level storage. Percentile type simplifies coding, ensures data type consistency and aligned. PL SQL principles of structured programming. It reduces maintenance overhead when table structures change, enabling flexible and reliable manipulation of complete rows within ESQL locks or procedures. Question 11. In the context of transaction control, Mr. notices that a procedure updates multiple tables, but a subsequent error leaves some tables partially updated. How should he handle this to ensure atomicity? A. Use commit after each DML statement. B. Implement save points and rollback on exceptions. C. Rely solely on implicit commits. D. Split the procedure into multiple anonymous blocks. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Using save points allows granular control over transactions, enabling partial rollbacks to a known save point if an error occurs, thus maintaining atomicity across multiple tables. Committing after each DML can leave the database in an inconsistent state if later operations fail. Implicit commits occur automatically only in certain contexts and cannot recover intermediate errors. Splitting into multiple blocks increases complexity and does not guarantee atomicity. Best practices in ESQL emphasize explicit transaction management to ensure data integrity and predictable behavior in multi-step operations. Question 12. Based on the information, Reynolds wants to create a function that performs calculations on employee salaries and can be reused in multiple reports. Which approach ensures reusability and proper encapsulation? A. Write the logic directly in each report's SQL query. B. Create standalone procedure. C. Define function within package specification. D. Use an anonymous block for each report. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Defining the function within a package specification exposes it as a reusable subprogram while encapsulating its implementation within the package body. Standalone procedures cannot return values and are less organized for reusable computation. Writing logic in multiple queries violates dry, don't repeat yourself principles and increases maintenance risk. Anonymous blocks are ephemeral, once and then discarded. Using package functions ensures modular design, consistency across reports, and maintainability, aligning with PSQL development best practices and promoting encapsulation. Question 13. From a practical standpoint, Dr. Williams wants to iterate over a dataset without explicitly opening and closing cursors. ESQL construct is most suitable. A. Implicit cursor for loop. B. Nested table iteration. C. Associative array traversal. D. Cursor declared in a package body. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. An implicit cursor for loop automatically declares, opens, fetches, and closes the cursor for the selected query, simplifying code and reducing boilerplate. Nested tables or associative arrays require explicit handling of collection operations. Declaring cursors in a package body still requires explicit open fetch close statements. Using implicit cursor loops ensures safe, efficient iteration over query. Result aligns with best practices for simplifying cursor management, reducing runtime errors, and improving code readability in ESQL applications. Question 14. In light of recent developments, Mr. Thompson wants to handle a situation where an update statement may not affect any rows. Which cursor attribute allows him to determine this reliably? A. Percent row count. B. Percent not found. C. Percent found. D. Percent bulk row count. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. The percent not found attribute evaluates to true if the last fetch or DML statement did not affect any rows, providing a clear mechanism to handle no-op scenarios. Percent row count returns the number of affected rows but requires additional comparison logic. Percent found only indicates whether any rows exist, not if the operation was successful. Percent bulk row count applies to bulk operations. Individual DML statements. Using percent not found allows developers to implement conditional logic, handle exceptions gracefully, and ensure robust, predictable behavior in ESQL programs. Question 15. Considering the evidence, Garcia is designing a trigger to maintain an audit trail of deleted records in a table. Which configuration best captures old row values before deletion? A. Before delete row level trigger. B. After insert row level trigger. C. Before update statement level trigger. D. After delete statement level trigger. Answer. Correct answer A. Explanation. A before delete row level trigger provides access to the hold pseudo record, allowing the system to capture values prior to deletion. After delete triggers occur after the row is removed, limiting access to previous values. After insert triggers are irrelevant for deletions, and statement level triggers execute once per statement rather than per row, missing detailed information. Proper use of row level before delete triggers aligns with auditing best practices, ensuring accurate historical data capture and maintaining data integrity across transactional operations. Question 16. To what degree does Mr. Brown understand PL SQL collections if he wants to perform bulk inserts efficiently? Which construct should he use? A. Associative arrays with for B. Arrays with explicit loop C. Nested tables with cursor loops D. Implicit cursors without collections. Answer. Correct answer A. Explanation. Associative arrays combined with for all statements allow but DML orations without repeated context switches, optimizing performance. Arrays are limited in size and less flexible for sparse data. Nested tables require additional management for bulk operations, and cursor loops still execute row by row, reducing efficiency. Using associative arrays with for all aligns with Oracle Performance Guide, ensuring high-speed insertion while maintaining code simplicity and reducing database engine overhead. Bulk operations are critical for large datasets in the SQL applications. Question 17. While analyzing subprogram dependencies, Dr. Ahmed notices that changes to one procedure cause failures in another dependent procedure. What is the best way to manage such dependencies? A. Use package encapsulation to minimize external references. B. Keep all procedures standalone to reduce coupling. C. Avoid using triggers in dependent procedures. D. Use anonymous blocks instead of procedures. Answer. Correct answer C. Explanation. Managing dependencies requires awareness of which objects rely on others. Avoiding unnecessary triggers in dependent procedures reduces hidden execution paths and side effects. Package encapsulation can help organize code but does not eliminate interdependencies. Keeping procedures standalone may reduce reuse and modularity. Anonymous blocks are not reusable and do not resolve dependency issues. Dependency management, including minimizing hidden triggers, ensures maintainability, reduces runtime errors, and aligns with PL SQL principles for stable and predictable application behavior. Question 18. When evaluating the merits of using percentro type, Wilson decides to declare a record variable based on a table with multiple columns. What is the primary advantage of this approach? A. Automatic alignment with table structure and type safety. B. Ability to store only scalar values. C. Eliminates the need for cursors. D. Ensures DML statements commit automatically. Answer. Correct answer A. Explanation. The percentro type attribute creates a record variable with the same column structure and data types as the table or cursor row, ensuring type safety and reducing maintenance overhead. Scalar variables store single values, not structured rows. It does not replace cursors, which are needed for fetching multiple rows, and DML commits must still be explicitly managed. Using percentro type enhances code readability, reduces errors when table structures change, and aligns with best practices for structured, maintainable SQL programming by providing a direct mapping between table rows and program variables. Question 19. While examining exception handling, Mr. Davis wants to ensure that any runtime errors in a block are logged, but processing continues for subsequent operations. Which strategy is most appropriate? A. Use individual begin exception and blocks for each operation. B. Wrap the entire program in a single exception handler. C. Ignore exceptions using when others than null. D. Convert the block to a procedure without exception handling. Answer. Correct answer D. Explanation. Individual begin exception. End blocks allow localized error handling without affecting unrelated operations, enabling logging and recovery per operation. Wrapping everything in a single handler risks halting the entire process. Ignoring exceptions can mask critical errors, and converting to a procedure without exception handling does not solve the problem. Structured exception handling ensures that errors are captured, appropriate remedial actions are taken, and subsequent opera continue, which aligns with PL SQL best practices for robust, maintainable applications and fault-tolerant design. Question 20. In a modern context of SL, is Taylor wants to execute an AR statement constructed at runtime with unknown table names. Which method allows safe execution while preventing SQL injection? A. Execute immediate with bind variables. B. Dynamic SQL with string concatenation only. C. Static SQL with hard-coded table names. D. Anonymous blocks without dynamic SQL. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Execute immediate with bind variables allows dynamic execution while safely substituting values without concatenating strings directly, thus minimizing SQL injection risks. Pure string concatenation is vulnerable to injection. Static SQL cannot handle runtime table names, and anonymous blocks without dynamic SQL cannot accommodate variable object names. Using dynamic SQL with binding ensures flexibility, maintainability, and security, conforming to Oracle ESQL best practices for executing statements with variable table names and parameters while safeguarding against malicious input. Question 21. In a modern context of ESL, Mr. Ortega is designing a procedure that must handle multiple result sets dynamically returned from different queries. Which approach is most appropriate? A. Use explicit cursors for each query. B. Implement ref cursors to pass result sets. C. Store all results in scalar variables. D. Use nested loops over static tables. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Ref cursors allow procedures to return different result sets at runtime and can be passed between subprograms, providing flexibility in dynamic applications. Explicit cursors require a fixed query at compile time and cannot adapt dynamically. Storing results in scalar variables is unsuitable for multiple rows and columns, while nested loops over static tables do not accommodate dynamic datasets. Using cursors aligns with best practices for modular, maintainable LSQL programs, enabling runtime flexibility while preserving type safety and performance. Question 22. Taking into account package state, is Jordan wants to track session-specific counters that persist across multiple subprogram calls. Which technique best achieves this? A. Declare global package variables in the specification. B. Use local variables inside procedures. C. Store counters in a temporary table. D. Pass counters as in parameters to subprograms. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Package-level variables declared in the specification maintain state for the session, allowing multiple subprograms to access and update them without losing values. Local variables in procedures are recreated with each call. Temporary tables require explicit EML and management, and passing counters as parameters is cumbersome and prone to errors. Using package state effectively supports modular design, session-specific persistence, and reduces complexity, adhering to Oracle's recommended practices for tracking runtime state across multiple SQL subprogram executions. Question 23. Considering the evidence Mr. Singh wants to enforce business logic that prevents negative salary updates in a table where SQL construct is most suitable. A. Before update row level trigger with validation logic. B. After update statement level trigger. C. Stored function returning null on invalid updates. D. Anonymous block for each salary update. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. A before update row level trigger allows the system to validate the new salary before it is written to the database, ensuring integrity and enforcing business rules. After update triggers execute post update and cannot prevent invalid data. Functions returning null cannot stop the DML operation unless called within a check, and anonymous blocks are ad hoc and not reusable. Using a before update trigger aligns with best practices, providing automatic enforcement of constraints and maintaining data integrity transparently across all session operations. Question 24. To better understand dynamic SQL, is Rivera constructs an execute immediate statement with user input for table names. Which principle should she follow to prevent SQL injection? A. Use bind variables for data values, not object names. B. Concatenate all user inputs directly. C. Avoid using dynamic SQL entirely. D. Execute statements without exception handling. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. Using bind variables prevents SQL injection for values while still allowing dynamic execution. Object names cannot be bound, so they require validation before concatenation. Direct concatenation of user inputs is unsafe. Static SQL cannot handle variable tables, and executing without exceptions increases risk. By carefully validating object names and using bind variables for data values, developers ensure secure, maintainable, and flexible dynamic SQL execution, following Oracle's security best practices, protecting against runtime vulnerabilities. Question 25. From a practical standpoint, Mr. Brown wants to count the number of records affected by a delete statement. Which attribute provides this information efficiently? A. SQL % count. B. Cursor % open. C. %bulk row count. D. DBMS output per line. Answer. Correct answer. A. Explanation. SQL % row count provides the number of rows affected by the most recent EML statement, enabling developers to verify operations and implement conditional logic. Cursor % open only indicates cursor state, not row count. %bulk row count applies to bulk operations like for all, and EMS output merely prints messages without providing row-level feedback. Utilizing % row count aligns with ESQL best practices, allowing precise monitoring of EML effects, supporting auditing, validation, and flow control in procedural logic. Question 26. In an effort to optimize performance, Chen wants to minimize repeated context switches between SQL and SQL agents. Which practice is most effective? A. Use bulk operations like for all and bulk collect. B. Open and close explicit cursors multiple times. C. Use multiple anonymous blocks for each operation. D. Perform row-by-row processing in loops. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Bulk operations like for all and bulk collect efficiently reduce context switching, fetching, and processing multiple rows at once. Opening and closing cursors repeatedly or row-by-row loops increase engine context switching overhead. Multiple anonymous blocks fragment code but do not inherently optimize performance. Bulk processing techniques follow Oracle's performance guidelines, ensuring faster execution for large datasets, reduced CPU overhead, and maintainable SQL code that leverages the strengths of both SL and ESQL engines. Question 27. Through the lens of ESQL architecture, Mr. Kumar wants to understand why some exceptions are raised automatically. Which concept explains this behavior? A. Implicit cursors raise predefined exceptions like no data found. B. Explicit cursors always suppress exceptions. C. Anonymous blocks cannot raise exceptions. D. Package variables automatically handle errors. Answer. Correct answer. B. Explanation. Implicit cursors automatically raise predefined exceptions such as no data found or too many rows when an error statement fails to return expected data. Explicit cursors require manual handling of exceptions. Anonymous blocks can raise exceptions if coded, but they do not inherently suppress them. Package variables do not manage exceptions automatically. Understanding implicit cursor behavior is critical in SQL as it affects control flow and exception handling design, enabling robust error detection and recovery without adding unnecessary manual checks. Question 20. While examining cursor attributes, Lopez wants to iterate only through rows returned by a query and automatically know when no more rows exist. Which construct simplifies this? A. Cursor for loop. B. Manual open fetch close explicit cursor. C. Associative array without iteration. D. Nested loops with scalar variables. Answer. Correct answer. C. Explanation. Cursor for loops simplify row iteration by automatically handling open, fetch, and close operations and checking % not found internally. Manual explicit cursors require more code and error-prone checks. Associative arrays store data but require explicit looping. Nested loops with scalar variables do not handle cursor results automatically. Using cursor for loops reduces boilerplate, ensures safe iteration over query results, and aligns with Oracle best practices for concise, maintainable SQL code, particularly in scenarios involving row-level processing. Question 29. In what ways can Mr. Alvarez ensure a stored procedure is reusable across multiple applications while supporting optional input parameters? A. Use default values for parameters and place the procedure in a package. B. Create multiple standalone procedures with different parameters. C. Use anonymous blocks for each scenario. D. Avoid parameters and hardcode all values. Answer. Correct answer, A. Explanation. Assigning default values to parameters allows optional input, making procedures flexible for multiple use cases. Placing the procedure in a package provides modularity, namespace management, and encapsulation. Creating multiple standalone procedures leads to redundancy and maintenance challenges. Anonymous blocks are ephemeral and unsuitable for reuse. Hardcoding values eliminates flexibility. Default parameters in packaged procedures follows best practices, enabling both reusability and maintainable design while supporting various calling scenarios. Question 30. Given the circumstances, is DIAS wants to process a collection of employee records efficiently and access both first and last elements frequently. SQL method is most appropriate. A. Use collection methods first and last on array or nested tables. B. Loop through an associative array without methods. C. Use scalar variables for each element. D. Rely on implicit cursors only. Answer. Correct answer, D. Explanation. Using collection methods first and last provides efficient access to boundary elements of arrays or nested tables and supports indexed operations. Associative arrays without methods lack direct support for boundary checks. Scalar variables cannot represent multiple elements effectively, and implicit cursors only handle query results, not collections. Proper use of collection methods enables predictable, maintain, and high-performance operation of SQL collections, ensuring optimal handling of large datasets and alignment with best practices for structured data processing.